We're live. Hi, everyone.
Good morning.
Wait a second. We're live. Good morning.
Good
Hi,
morning.
everyone. Thanks for joining me, State Representative Dodi Joseph. I really appreciate you coming on board with us. So we have really insight and everything you've done, but I'm going to let you introduce yourself. So for everybody that do not know me, I'm Commissioner Gladys Mizrahi. I'm Aventura City Commissioner, and we welcome today's State Representative Dodi Joseph.
Awesome. So for those who don't know me, the real way to pronounce my name is Dotsi Joseph. That's in Creole. The pre-approved alternative for Anglophone, so if you speak English, it's Dottie Joseph. And in Espanol, Doti Joseph. So my lovely commissioner tends to mix it up because she knows all the pronunciations. But in English, it's just Dottie Joseph.
I love the Creole. It sounds really nice.
I mean, that's the real way to do it. So in terms of an introduction, what all would you like me to cover? Just my background or?
Your background, anything you want to say about yourself.
Okay. Well, I was born in Haiti, raised in Miami, public schools all throughout, Yale undergrad, Georgetown Law. I'm an attorney. I practice mostly civil rights, employment, local government. And, I'm here just to serve the people. There's a lot going on these days. And I see a difference when there is leadership at the helm that is focused on people and those numbers and the impact on people versus other things. Just for example, with the coronavirus crisis and, how different people handle the pandemic worldwide, we look over at New Zealand that's led by a woman and the decisions are being made in terms of scientific basis, and they're at 0 cases of coronavirus. Whereas us, a so-called first world country in the United States, a very different story is unraveling. So that's it.
Well, I cannot agree with you more about how New Zealand handled the whole thing. Also, Germany is in the process of coming back. They have everything under control. It's also handled by a woman.
South Korea,
And
like lots of them.
and they're doing amazingly well. The part that it really hurts is that we lost 3 months without actually closing and doing everything with contact tracing. We don't even have a plan for contact tracing, while other countries have that plan in sight. So it really hurts that we lost all those months, that people are really struggling. The economic impact has been horrendous. And I'll tell you from my point of view, I do events. So events is completely shut down. And we've had to concentrate on the little boxes.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the ball was dropped at the beginning, but we see the ball continuing to be dropped, right? Every day is a new day to restart the clock and get this virus under control. The bad thing about the virus is how communicable it is. It's very infectious. It's in the air. It lands on surfaces. But the good thing about it is it only lasts for a certain period. So if you limit contact with people who are infected, then that controls the virus. It controls the spread. It's a very natural way to do it. And that's not the case with some other diseases. So this is one of those things that's totally within our control to control if we just hunker down for 3 weeks and shut stuff down for 3 weeks, and then things can be under control. And I know people don't like to hear shut stuff down, but if we do, that helps. And then you don't have to worry about reclosing and opening and all of that other stuff. Like, you just shut it down for a period, monitor, do the contact tracing, do the testing. And if somebody's trying to tell you, oh, our numbers are increasing because of testing, or if you don't test, it's not going to show. Well, that's like telling somebody if you don't test, if you think you're pregnant and you don't test for it, you won't be pregnant. Like, that's absurd. So anyway, I'll just stop.
No, because there's some people that still don't believe.
I mean, you don't have to believe, just look at the deaths. Just look at
No, but people are still, they don't believe. This week there was a woman, and I really want to share it because so that everybody knows what's going on. Her son had a fever and he was throwing up. The doctor told her, can he have contacted COVID? And she said, oh yes, because maybe because I'm not taking care of myself. And he said, you know what, please take him to the hospital and have him tested. Why would I do that? I don't care. And it's not about her, it's about all the people that this kid has been with. The family, you don't know if the family has any health compromise that have been around him. So that's the biggest problem, that people do not care. It's not about us, it's about everyone. It's about working together. So with that, let's go on to our topic, because if not here, we can stay forever on the COVID. But tell me, what have you done? Like, I know that after the George Floyd incident, the whole movement of Black Lives Matter exploded with reason. There has been a lot of things. So tell me how you see it from a community, from a resident, and also from an elected official.
Okay. So Black Lives Matter, let's talk about it from the community perspective first. I mean, it's something that a lot of people already knew was an issue, right? Black Lives Matter didn't just erupt this
No,
year.
it was here from many years ago.
Exactly. And when you think about the underpinnings of it, from the inception of this country, when we talk about how we value one life versus another, some lives just had more value than others. If we're looking at it in the reality, when this country was founded, Black people were considered 3/5 of a person, right? That was a 3/5 compromise, and that's codified in our Constitution. It's since been, addressed, but Black people couldn't vote. Women couldn't vote. This year marks the 100-year anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, which grants women the right to vote. And then another little known fact is even white men without property could not vote. So if you were not rich, your vote, your voice was not as important as somebody else because you didn't have the right to vote. So these are things that have changed over the passage of time. But these are things that are important to know because they impact, where we are with the country right now, because those are the foundations. So fast forward, when we talk about policing in the United States, policing has taken different forms throughout the United States, right? So when we think about, people traveling west and basically taking land from Native Americans, the police served a certain function. When we talk about police in other parts of the United States where people are just starting to get together and they're trying to keep law and order, some of those have less racist underpinnings, but other ones where you're looking at, for example, when they're called to enforce fugitive slave laws. For those who don't know what that is, that's when slaves would run away from their captors because nobody should be enslaved in the first place. But they would run away, and there were laws passed to say that you could capture these escaped slaves and then bring them back to their master. So when we talk about enforcement, we have to also look at what laws are being enforced and what's the purpose of that enforcement. There's also a market history of, the KKK infiltrating law enforcement and using the cover of law to basically discriminate against and brutalize and terrorize Black people. Now, again, these are very broad strokes. This is not everywhere. And let me bring it down to local in Miami-Dade County. We have some really great chiefs of police all throughout the county who understand a lot of the issues around Black Lives Matter, and they themselves are doing some self-evaluation of some things that could be improved. Everything from training to the arbitration process, decertification, like real conversations are happening. So to get from the point that we were before to now, if people know a little bit about the history of Miami-Dade County, And when I say Miami-Dade County, I'm talking about it as a whole, but within the municipalities, they have all kinds of issues. Biscayne Park used to have some really bad issues when it comes to targeting Black people, whether it's for traffic citations or whatever else, but it's not the only one. We can go through city by city and talk about a lot of the issues that they've had, but we have to understand that's in the greater context of structural racism, right? And all of that is a vestige of the transatlantic slave trade. So when we talk about, Black Lives Matter, we're just saying that they should be treated, all people should be treated the same. But the reality is, most people are not treated the same. Most of the time, sometimes it's because of race, sometimes it's because of economic status, any number of things. And truth be told, Hispanics are not treated the same equally, like either when it comes to police brutality. So whatever's happening in America, whether we're talking about COVID-19 or police brutality, when there's an old saying, when America catches a cold, Black America catches pneumonia. So whatever it is just exacerbated by institutional and systemic racism, as well as just like implicit bias when it comes to things like racial profiling. So it's something that's endemic throughout the entire system. And when I say throughout the entire system, I'm not talking about just the criminal justice system, but the entire system. So from the time that the police officers decide who they're going to pursue, when they're going to actually pursue them, who they're actually going to arrest, what decisions they make when that interaction occurs, what they're charged with, what the prosecutor goes forward with in terms of a charge, what the judge allows, what they negotiate in terms of a plea bargain or not, what they offer in terms of a plea bargain or not, whether they drop the charges, whether they null pros them. Like, there are a whole host of decisions that need to be made along the way. And at every single point, there's an opportunity to mitigate racism or just let racism exacerbate what's happening. And that goes all the way to sentencing and then post-sentencing. Even right now, we're looking at a issue with, convicted felons who have paid their debt to society, they've paid their time in jail, and now being able to come home and vote. Florida has 24%. In the entire United States, 24% of the people who cannot vote as a result of a criminal conviction reside in the state of Florida. That's a problem. And that's not necessarily a race issue because it cuts across racial lines. But the point is, right now, the legislature, the Republican-dominated legislature, is insisting that it's a rich man's game. So if you come out of jail and you can afford to pay your fines, fees, costs, whatever has amounted, then you can vote. But if you're poor and you can't afford to do it, then you can't vote, which
But
is
wasn't this on the ballot? That
it
it was
was on the
voted,
ballot.
that it was restituted and they would vote?
That's what the people said. The
Yeah.
people, when I say the people, Republicans, Democrats, independents, everybody was supportive of this, right? But the Republican dominated leadership in the legislature, and including the governor right now, who's just hell bent on appealing this. So at every stage so far, we've won in the litigation. They've quoted some of my debate and some of the litigation to talk about some of the racist underpinnings of some of these laws in Florida in general, whether we're talking about poll taxes or grandfather clauses, lots of other things that were
So
specifically.
wait, let me ask you something for the normal people that are not lawyers.
Yes.
So if you're convicted, no matter what, and if you have money to pay all the fines, you can vote. But if
So
you don't have the money, then you cannot vote.
no. So Florida has a stat. Basically, if you're convicted of certain crimes, you cannot vote. You lose your right to vote. You can apply through the clemency process to get that right to vote restored. But not too long ago, the citizens passed by overwhelming support an initiative that would allow returning citizens, people who have paid their time, for certain crimes. So we excluded murder and certain kinds of more egregious crimes. But everybody else, if you didn't fall into those egregious category crimes, then you would have your right to vote restored. That was the initiative. What the Republicans are trying to say, and when I say the Republicans, I'm speaking very broadly, some of them get it, some of them don't, is that you have to pay all your fines, fees, costs, etc., before you can get your right to vote restored. Now, let me tell you, before the legislature decided to insert itself into the process, which it didn't need to, lots of counties throughout the state had different processes wherein people could get their right to vote back, and that not be impacted by all the fines, fees, costs, etc. It would just be treated as a civil lien. So what that means is, just like if you steal money from somebody and they go get a judgment and that says you owe them, then that will stay on your credit. They'll get a judgment, and as you have the ability to pay, you have to pay them, right? But that has no impact on your right to vote, nor should it. So what they're doing is, instead of making it a civil lien, which was entirely within our authority to do, they have decided to hook that to your right to vote, which I argue and still argue is unconstitutional.
Oh, wait, I've gotten a lot of the calls and comments that when all the protests started, going back to all the part where the violence started, that with the Black Lives Matter, what happened with all the kids and family that were killed by their own community? Those lives matter as well. People
What?
that were, when all the protests started after the George Floyd incident, this was concentrated only on the police. But what happens, don't the Black Lives Matter in certain cities that there's a lot of violence and have been killed as well by Black lives? So those lives don't matter?
I'm confused about your question. Are you asking, so if we're talking about Black Lives Matter,
together.
Okay, yeah.
Because there has been a lot of the violence, and a lot of the people, Black people, have been killed by Black people.
Okay.
Not by police.
Let me unpackage that misnomer, okay?
Okay.
So people kill who are near them. So most of the time, because of segregation and systemic racism and policies like redlining that keep Black people in areas where there are other Black people and keep white people in areas where there are other white people, then those people, when they do kill, guess who they kill? People that look like them, right? So if we're talking about Black on Black crime, which is what I think you're alluding to,
yeah,
it really has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter, for the record. Then we also need to talk about white on white crime. So there's lots of crime that is reported that talks about white people killing white people, but that never enters the conversation. So we're not saying that a life is more or less valuable depending on the skin color of the person who kills them. That's irrelevant. A life is a life is a life, and it's valuable.
It doesn't matter what it is.
Whoever kills them. So what I'm saying is nobody should be killing anybody, period. And what we're saying in terms of the Black Lives Matter concept is that people should not suffer a worse consequence, specifically death or anything else that's excessive force, because of their skin color. So those two issues are not the same. So I want to make sure that we parse them out. And, to the extent that people like to throw out the concept of, Black on Black crime, there's also white on white crime. And there's more white on white crime. There's more
we're having this conversation so we can all learn.
Say that again?
No, that this is why we're having this conversation, so we can all learn about it.
I agree. And I'm just saying, to the extent that people want to talk about Black on Black crime, then you also need to talk about white on white crime, which is way more than the other way around.
Yeah, but it doesn't get as much news.
Right. And there's a convenient reason for that.
So let me ask you two things based on what you were talking about. You said that people live near people, live with near Blacks, white people live near Blacks. There was a video that was released. They sent it to me a few days ago on a prominent Jewish neighborhood in New York. And there had been a lot of attacks by Black people to Jewish people, where history has shown that they have lived together for many years with no incidents. After the incident with George Floyd, there has been a series of attacks. And a lot of the people that were asked, why are you now attacking the Jewish people? Their answer was, because we're poor, because they own everything. And that was very disturbing, because it was, they own the houses, they own the business, they own everything, and we need to attack because there's no
never heard of those
equality.
stories. I've never heard of those stories.
I'm gonna send you the video. It's too long to put it right now, but I'm gonna send you the video so that you look at it.
Okay,
And it
so
was a little disturbing because they have lived together. If you look down, a lot of the very religious neighborhoods up north live very close to many Black communities, and they have lived forever. It was this incident right now. That's
yeah,
what.
so I'm not familiar with that particular incident. I will tell you that the Jewish community has been very supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement in general. If the conversation we're having is, you know, how do we move forward? To the extent that people are ignorant, they're ignorant across the board, whether they're Black, white, purple, Jewish, whatever, you know, because they're incidents that go both ways. So I'm not familiar with the incidents that you're referring to in New York. I just don't know anything about them. So I'm not in a position to speak intelligently about it. But I will say that, you know, ever since the current occupant of the White House has taken, you know, hold of the administration, there has been an uptick in hate crimes across everyone. So whether we're talking about against Black people and churches getting bombed, or whether we're talking about against Jewish people and temples getting attacked, and all kinds of other forms of violence based on discrimination, we're all in that same boat. When they went marching in, I forget the state, but with the torches and stuff, they were like, no Blacks, no Jews, no this, no that, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, for people who are paying attention, they would know that we're all in this together. And when I say we, it's not everybody versus white people. It's all people. It's all people of conscience. It's all people who understand what good and evil is, what good and bad is, because all it takes for good, for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. So I'm particularly holding accountable, whether we're talking about Republicans or anybody else who enables this president to do some of the things that he's doing, and fan the flames that he's fanning, because it's not good for any of us. It's not good for Black people. It's not good for white people. It's not good for Jewish people. It's not good for any kind of social construct group that you want to ascribe to, because it's just not good. When we don't treat people equally, and we have a lack of empathy and humanity for people, everybody suffers and pays the consequence of that one way or another, whether it's economically, whether it's morally, whether it's, you know, socially. We all lose when we play this game of separation. And you know who wins? It's not us. It's not the American people. It's Russia. It's Russia. It's countries that want to see us lose. It's country that wants to see us divided. It's foreign aggressors that will pay to kill American citizens who are serving our country to protect our rights to freedom. That's who suffers. So that's it.
But with the last speech of the president on 4th of July, it was very divisive. It was not unifying the country. Why no one has spoken about it?
Why has somebody not spoken about his speech?
His speech.
Lots of people are speaking about his speech. All throughout social media, people are talking about how idiotic he is, how divisive.
His own party. I wouldn't believe that the senators that have governed this country will not say anything. I am so totally shocked. Well, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, this is a very hateful speech for a 4th of July.
Yes. So instead of focusing on the numbers that matter, the people who are being impacted by COVID-19, the people who are dying as a result of COVID-19, our foreign troops who are being targeted by Russians, he wants to focus on things to distract us. So I would say not give him the time of day, and we need to focus on the upcoming elections.
And move forward. So how do we move forward?
So part of it is.
Do you agree on the whole movement of defunding the police?
So we need to talk about what that means. Let's unpackage that a little bit.
Yes.
I see it's 11:30. I'm going to have to hop off soon. So let me try to synthesize this. So when people say defund the police, it doesn't mean take away all the money from the police. I know that that's what it intuitively sounds like, but that's not what it means. It means reimagine.
For many people, close the police department and goodbye.
And that's not at all what it means. So that's what it sounds like, but it has nothing to do with that. So in places, let me give you an example, like Oregon, certain calls when they come into 911, instead of being routed to the police, they're routed to social workers or mental health professionals who can help in those situations. And if they need to get the police involved, meaning introduce somebody with a badge and a gun into a already sensitive situation, then they would need to get that person involved. But they've had a lot of success with making sure that certain calls are routed to professionals who are more trained in how to handle those particular situations. And they've had a lot of success with it. So what defund the police really means is more in terms of like an invest, divest, looking at what things are best handled by the police and what things might be best handled by another professional, and divvying up accordingly. So looking at how much of our budget, whether it's, for example, in your city's budget or the county's budget or how much of that budget is being directed towards law enforcement and what specifically in those line items, right? So we're not just talking about the budget in general, but what things in there are things that we want to make sure that we have our law enforcement, because we want our law enforcement to be, funded. We want them to be able to protect us, but we also want to make sure that we're maximizing their use so that they're doing their highest and best use. We want them to be able to protect us and have money to get body cams and whatever else, whatever other resources they need, right? However, when we talk about what other things are needed in our community to interrupt, that's, for example, school to prison pipeline, or to interrupt systemic racism, there are lots of things that we can be funding within our communities. And you see this nationwide where they're taking some money from the police budgets and then reinvesting it into communities and things that will help interrupt that school to prison pipeline and minimize issues that turn out to lead to Black Lives Matter incidents.
But you can also do that without defunding the police. You can take some funds and balance your city's budget while adding different programs.
Right. And
what I don't understand is why defund the police when they really need the resources to keep us safe.
So part of it is the resources, but part of it is reimagining how policing is done, which has
correct. That is training, that is education.
Right, but those are two different things. So what you just talked about is the budgetary piece. That's part of it, but part of it is it goes beyond the budget. It addresses our fund in the United States. We have a knee-jerk reaction to call 911, but we also have over militarization of the police in general. We have a tendency to go to force or lethal force more so than any other country. So when we talk about, earlier we talked about the pandemic and how different countries were handling it. And as a result, countries handle it, the outcomes are different. People die less. The same thing happens when we're talking about police
because of gun control.
Right, but regardless of whether we're talking about Black people, white people, people tend to die more in the United States as a result of police interactions versus other countries where they're taught to de-escalate, where their training is different, where they're engaged more with the person before they resort to lethal force, right?
But it's education.
Part of it
issue is
educating
the police training the police in a different way, but not defunding and closing the police department.
Nobody's,
I
again,
don't,
when people say defunding the police, it has nothing to do with closing down law enforcement. It has
okay, but that is the way they're projecting it to be.
and we have to be very mindful of the politics that people play, because
Correct, and that is why I wanted to touch on it as well.
Exactly.
Because we need to understand that we're not closing police departments.
Yes. And just so you know, I have 1 more minute. So whatever you want to talk about.
You want to say something on how we're moving forward? What is your take on what would you do to move forward and start new?
Sure. So right now, we really just need to slow down and be human beings, right? At the end of the day, what touched a lot of our hearts about what happened with George Floyd is we saw a human being on the ground having his life snuffed out by somebody who just did not give a flying F, like they just did not care. And that touches us. And we just have to remember that we're human beings, regardless of what color we are on the inside. We're all the same on the outside. We're all the same on the inside. And as long as we treat people with respect, dignity, that we would expect not only to be treated ourselves, but if we had a child, how would we want that person to be treated? So as long as we do that, I think that's a big piece of it. As far as the moving forward part, so that talks about the hearts, but we need to talk about elections. We need people who understand our issues, who understand that people are people, and that all people need to be protected, and that it's important to focus on the right numbers. The right numbers are, who is dying as a result of COVID-19? What can we do to fix that, as opposed to what's the impact on my campaign rally? So as long as we understand that, and remember when we're taking that to the polls, I encourage people to register, to request their ballot, to vote by mail. It's the safest way to do it. In light of COVID-19, you get your ballot. If you're not sure how that process works, just visit my Facebook page and click on videos. I have a webinar in English, one in Creole and one in Spanish, explaining the vote by mail process, how to request it online. You can get it. Make sure you sign it. Once you sign it, make sure you return it on time. It has to be received by the supervisor of elections no later than election day. If it gets there any later than that, then it's not going to count. So that can't be cured. So make sure you fill out your ballot. Make sure you fill out the entire ballot. If you're not sure of who, or you have questions in that process, reach out to me. My website is dottiejoseph.com. You can just click on contact us, and then you can ask me whatever questions you want, and I'll do my best to guide you. But it's important that we have right leadership, because people are voting. The question is, will your vote be counted? Because if not, a decision is going to be made for you, because there's going to be a decision made regardless. And we need to not fall prey to the outside influences. They're going to try to convince us that it doesn't matter, because it does. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you, Commissioner Mizrahi, for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on board. Good luck, and to be continued. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
All right. Bye.
With this, we're ending our conversation today. Stay tuned for next week with Senator Tadeo, and we're doing it in Spanish. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day and stay safe.